Hello world, welcome back to another Breakout Finder videocast. I'm your host Nate Liss. You can find me on Twitter at @OutRagedJew. And as always, my guy Ryan Lopes, you can find him on Twitter at StillRyan5. And tonight, you didn't think it could get any bigger than some of the other guests that we've had. JJ Zacharyson, Matt Kelly, Danny Kelly, not related.
A lot of Kellys.
But, too many Kellys. But tonight, we're changing up the last names. We have brought on Matt Harmon of Yahoo Sports. You can find him on Twitter at MattHarmon_BYB. Matt, what is the good word?
Yo, guys, thank you so much for having me on. I'm excited to kick it around with you guys.
Yeah, you know, Ryan and I had talked in the past about getting you on here. I know that you're a busy individual. You're big time in it now. It's good to see.
Bro, look at the backdrop he's working with right now. Obviously, he's big time in it right now.
That's what I'm saying.
Let me tell you, this is literally the conference room that I go into at work because I'm still here in the office. And this is the place I go to when I don't want to be bothered.
Nice.
Like, you know, and if I've actually got to do some writing, I'll come in here and kind of seclude myself. But there is a couple of windows so that if I see somebody walking by that I want to talk to, you know, I can kind of congregate them in. Because look, I'm a distracting presence in the office, that's for sure. So it's kind of best for me. It's best for everybody that I seclude myself in here with this little, I don't know, like I think this is kind of a lighthouse situation behind me.
Is it?
Okay.
I think so. I don't know what this is.
Yeah,
Bro,
I'm
Nate,
staring at it.
is he pushing JJ for the best backdrops? I mean, dude, JJ had a bookshelf, bro. He had a bookshelf.
JJ's background was about 19 grand, so I don't think so. JJ had like a full-on built-in. I mean, Matt, yours is impressive, but JJ's was pretty nice. So, and well, man, look, our thing on this show, Matt, is we jump right into it. There's no fiddling around on this show because
Very serious podcast.
yeah,
Very
it's a
serious.
very serious podcast, which means appropriately, I have to start off with a Riley Ridley question. Now, for people that don't know, Matt, maybe you can explain this. You do something called the reception perception. Can you explain it to people for those that don't know what it is?
Absolutely. So reception perception is the methodology that I developed about 5 years ago now to evaluate the wide receiver position. What I wanted to do was kind of try to quantify the qualitative reality of route running. Like we hear that thrown around all the time. You know, this guy's a good route runner, this guy's a bad route runner, but you know, what does that really mean? Can we try to quantify that? Can we put it into more of something that we can kind of compare year over year? And that's been the fun part about doing this series for the last 5 NFL seasons is now, you know, you're able to track players as they progress through their career. You're able to see, you know, what these metrics really mean. But basically what I'm trying to go in and evaluate is that route running ability. You know, I chart over an 8-game sample for NFL players, how often they run each route, how often they get open on each route, what type of coverages are they most successful at creating separation against man, zone, press, etc. So kind of trying to give you a full field picture of who a wide receiver is. This was the first year in a while that I hadn't done it on college prospects because changing over to this job, you know, that's just the access is a little bit different from what I had at the NFL Network. So didn't evaluate any college prospects in reception perception. But of course, you know, Riley Ridley, some of these other guys, I'd watched them, was familiar with their draft profiles after all.
Okay, good. Because look, Riley Ridley, a couple of the podcasts that Matt Kelly and I do, we stuck it to him pretty bad. And pre-combine, a lot of the big media scouts were high on Riley Ridley. The buzz was high. People thought he was going round 1. I heard that a lot, that he could be one of the early receivers off the board. The NFL passes judgment, not one of the early receivers. In fact, not even the first receiver from his own team taken off the board. What are your thoughts on Riley Ridley? Should we stay away? Is he like nuclear ooze?
Well, yeah, and he goes to a situation that's kind of crowded too, right? Like Chicago right now actually is a little beefy in the passing game target. You know, I'm a big fan of Allen Robinson, and, you know, I think he's in for a bounce back season. I think we saw enough out of reception perception with him last year that, you know, there's there's quality route running still there. There's still the ability to get open for being a big wide receiver. Now, if he's healthy, he kind of takes that next step, gets back to more of the form that we're used to. So I'm still really high on him as a bounce back player. And, you know, Taylor Gabriel's no joke as a reserve player, as like a contributor. Anthony Miller, I compared to Doug Baldwin coming out of college. I think that's just such a perfect comp for him. And then that's not to mention, you know, Tariq Cohen's back there. Trey Burton still exists. So it's not like this is a situation where he's coming into a ton of opportunity. And overall, I mean, prospects like Ridley are one of the reasons why I really wanted to do something like reception perception. Like, I think people get confused by a couple of, nice shakes in a route or whatever and say, oh, this guy's, a great separator. He's a great route runner. Like, I don't want to see, you be able to get open on a couple short routes and then call you a great route runner. I want you to be able to create separation all over the field and be that more dangerous, complete threat to say that this is a great route runner or someone that, is one of the best separators in the league. And what I saw out of Ridley in college, I didn't really see that. I did see some good, solid technique, but, there's more to it than just the technical understanding to be able to be that great route runner across the field.
So then, would you say you were not surprised where he went in the NFL draft? I mean, were you one of those people that kind of bought into that buzz, or did you think that the NFL assessed him fairly?
I think total fair assessment. This receiver class too, you mentioned guys like Mecole Hardman, who obviously went earlier than him, coming from the same school. He has that trump card trait that, the playmaking ability, which, may or may not be their replacement for Tyreek Hill. We don't know what's going on with that situation at this point anymore, but he adds a playmaking dimension to the offense. Guys like Miles Boykin, who I really liked, they offer more dynamic ability. So no, I'm never surprised when just a solid contributing receiver goes on day 3. That's what I see Riley Ridley being. He's nowhere near like it's his brother, his cousin is Calvin Ridley. It's his brother, right? And he's dynamic. That's not like, they're not similar to me at all, other than they're both pretty advanced in terms of the way they approach the game from a technique perspective, but from a dynamism perspective and an ability to get off the line of scrimmage, I don't think it was comparable between the two players at all.
We were talking offline before you hopped on here, Matt. I wanted to bring up Calvin, so I'm glad that you kind of started to go down that path a little bit. Obviously, we're going off sheet a little bit here, but you kind of alluded to him. But sounds to me like a better player in your eyes, someone that you had a higher evaluation on. There's been a couple industry type mock drafts going on. Obviously, we're kind of in the dead of summer right now, but someone like Sean Siegel, FF Contrarian, he's been snapping up Calvin Ridley. And talking highly of him whenever he can, whenever he gets on pods. Someone that I really, I value his opinion pretty highly. I'm sure there's probably other kind of, guys in the industry that are also talking of Calvin Ridley. So do you have a concrete Calvin Ridley opinion? Are you looking forward to a big year for him in that Atlanta offense?
Let me join the crowd in that case, because I love Calvin Ridley. He's one coming out of college. I did have a reception perception profile on him, and he was really exactly what you'd expect coming into the NFL, which is he was a dynamic route runner. He was a great separator against man, and especially against zone coverage. Actually still owns the highest success rate for zone coverage score that I've charted among college prospects, but also was pretty solid, not great, but pretty solid against press in a really difficult conference against really difficult cornerbacks. And that's something that I think is important when we're talking about reception perception for these college players, is I think it's much harder to kind of put an even playing field when you're looking at cornerback and defensive competition at the college level than it is at the NFL level. So I would put that out there. Again, Calvin Ridley, different than somebody like a DJ Moore coming out of college who didn't face as many tough cornerbacks, and then Calvin Ridley out there in the SEC going against good competition, overall was great in reception perception. Then you look at him as a rookie, I was actually even more impressed than I was expecting to be. He had a 93rd percentile success rate versus man coverage score. He gets to play as that flanker receiver, so he's only seeing press on about 23% of his routes, which is huge because you have Julio Jones there as that dynamic number one. I mean, he's in such a perfect role for his skill set, but he is truly a dynamic separator. I already think that these two are a top 5 wide receiver duo in the NFL right now. That's how high I am on Calvin Ridley. I know he's one of those people that I'm glad to hear that Sean Siegel, and a guy that I really respect too, is high on him, because I think it's tempting to kind of sound the regression alarm with Calvin Ridley. And that's true. I mean, he is going to see some regression just in terms of like the big plays that he made last year, the touchdowns per target number. But, we can never assume rational coaching. Shout out to Sigmund Bloom for that one. We can never assume rational coaching, but it would be completely irresponsible for the Falcons to not run their passing game through these two guys, because Ridley's really just that good.
I don't want to stay on this topic forever. Matt, but I got to ask you a question. When when Calvin Ridley was coming out of college, all we heard was he's an old prospect. Does that stuff even matter to you? I mean, when you break it down and you look at their stuff on tape and you look at the production, how much do you actually care about the age? Because in the metrics community, this is kind of a sticking point for people.
Mm-hmm. I think it matters, and I think it's one of the things that helps form the range of possibilities for a player. Because I mean, just intuitively, it does make sense that when you are, I don't know how old you guys are, but I'm about to turn 28. And I look back at like kids that are 18 now, and I'm like, holy hell, they're so young,
Right.
So
Right.
It makes sense that like if you're an 18-year-old or a 19-year-old and you're out there dominating, 20 to 21-year-olds, seniors in college or whatever, that is naturally incredibly impressive. So I do think it matters a lot from the younger player's perspective. I think it helps kind of form the possible range of a player, but it's never going to be the first or last point in a scouting profile to me. I think what they do on the field is much more important.
Right, I got you. And Matt, just to be fair, I'm much older than you are. I know I look younger with the wig and the glasses on.
Bro, the glasses are bringing you down, bro. You look what, 20, mid 20s?
Man, thank you very much. I take risks on this show. I'm much older though. All right, let's move to this question. So, who is more likely to take a step forward this year? I mean, slightly comparable situations, not identical. Tre'Quan Smith or Michael Gallup? Who do you have here?
Yeah, this question actually made me think for quite a while because, normally you would just say Tre'Quan Smith, he's in the better offense. He flashed a little bit last year. There were times where he had opportunity, didn't necessarily come through. But I'm actually going to say Michael Gallup in this situation, which does seem kind of counterintuitive because he's in, maybe he won't take the bigger step forward for fantasy just because, again, the offensive difference is huge here. But I actually do like a lot of what I'm hearing out of Dallas, in terms of what Kellen Moore is going to do for this offense. I think we'll see. It could be that Dallas gets off to a slow start and then Jason Garrett wants to take the reins back as a play caller, but it really does sound like Kellen Moore wants to push this offense into the modern era. And that's actually pretty exciting because I think Dallas has some intriguing pieces, outside of Jason Witten, which is just like, oh my God, what are we doing here?
We're doing it again.
We're really, really, really going to do this again. It's like, I remember that Jason Witten is back every few months and it just kind of bums me out. It just kind of bums me out, man. But, I mean, in terms of the rest of the offense, though, Amari Cooper, Zeke Elliott, Dak Prescott, and Michael Gallup, too, I don't think he got enough credit for really being the primary X receiver last year because even when Amari Cooper got there, this is a credit to the Dallas coaching staff and also the Oakland coaching staff. Both of those teams used him as that flanker slot receiver last year. And if people don't know what I mean by the flanker position, that's the receiver that, you're off the line of scrimmage at the snap. You're able to move around. This helps you get away from press coverage. This helps you get away from number one corner. So Michael Gallup was out there as a rookie and actually playing pretty well as an X receiver, on the line of scrimmage, seeing press coverage, facing top corners. And I actually think he's a guy that these two could really develop into a nice 1-2 punch as the year goes on.
What's your take here, Ryan?
No, I think Matt summed it up nicely. It was when I saw you put those two names, side by side, it was one of the questions I really had to kind of sit back and think about. The thing with New Orleans is, again, to Matt's point, the offense is better. I wonder about Drew Brees. I don't think he's going to fall off the cliff, but you have to imagine maybe he takes a slight step back. The biggest thing for Tre'Quan Smith's outlook for me, we know that passing attack is going through Mike Thomas. They just signed Jared Cook. I'm not a big Jared Cook guy, but again, there's some investment there. You imagine he's going to get involved. Obviously, the backfield, Alvin Kamara as well. Austin Carr, Ted Ginn is still there. I just see a lot more mouths to feed, in the Saints offense. So maybe Tre'Quan doesn't necessarily get the shine that he really needs to kind of take that next step forward. And not necessarily an indictment on his talent, because I do agree with Matt. He kind of saw some flashes here and there. I thought he was a good prospect coming out as well, but might find himself, buried unless he, kind of blows up in camp and really kind of forces the matter. But I agree with Matt's summary in general though.
Yeah, it's interesting depth charts. I mean, I don't know, Matt, where you are on Dak Prescott. Obviously, Drew Brees is a prolific quarterback. I mean, in terms of fantasy, he has been his whole career. So you always want to tether yourself to those offenses. But as much as I want to say that there's going to be a step forward from Tre'Quan Smith, it's such a projection. It's hard to really say if he's going to kind of falter in this offense. I mean, there's not a ton around him, but obviously, like you mentioned, Ted Ginn is in front of him. Michael Thomas is going to suck everything up. So I might lean the Michael Gallup way as well, just because that offense, even with Randall Cobb, a name that hasn't been brought up just yet, I think there's still room for him to maneuver in this offense, something that could be really fluid. Ryan, you wrote this next question. Why don't you throw this one over at Matt?
Yeah, no, we led off as we rightfully should have, talking about Matt's reception perception. And again, offline, we were talking about how this is the dead of summer right here. It's the same handful of topics that get recycled. And I'm sure you've been throwing, some gems on your timeline, Matt, but some under the radar, if that's even a thing anymore. I don't think sleepers really even exist anymore with the amount of coverage and stuff that this whole industry gets. But are there some sleeper type, under the radar types that your model, the reception perception, really loves? That these are players that aren't getting the buzz that you think they deserve.
Yeah, that was my first thought. I was like, oh man, who's even under the radar? Like, does Christian Kirk count as under the radar at this point? Probably not. But he's one that I really like. One to mention is Deshaun Hamilton, the receiver from the Broncos. And there's a two-parter here. Number one is Courtland Sutton. To me, he was a guy that I actually. He was pretty much as I would have expected as a rookie, which is a guy that looked like he needed work. He was not ready really to be a starting full-time receiver. And to be fair to the Broncos, I don't think when they headed into his rookie season, that's what they were planning on. Of course, they go and trade Demaryius Thomas, but I think the bigger problem was that Emmanuel Sanders gets hurt toward the end of the year. Sutton just really wasn't ready. His reception perception results were pretty poor. Looked very similar to a guy like Devontae Parker from a few years ago. I know that's not a name anybody wants to hear, but yeah. So that's just one thing. Like Sutton's on my. I think Sutton could take a step forward, but we don't know that yet. And Hamilton, to his credit, and this is also not surprising, he comes out and performs really well when called upon. Sucks up some volume, gets some opportunity late in the year, and he's a guy that I really like coming into this year because, Joe Flacco has always had that security blanket. If you think about his entire career in Baltimore, oftentimes it was a tight end like Dennis Pitta, but at other times it was Steve Smith kind of transitioning to that short slot receiver mold. Derek Mason, even when Flacco was first starting out. And I think Hamilton could be that guy for him this year because he was a player who was great in reception perception in college, can get that quick separation, can get off the line of scrimmage on the few times that he has pressed. So he's someone that the model really likes. Albert Wilson, kind of in a similar. I've been chirping about Burt for a long time.
Yeah, you love Burt, man.
But this was the one time that I really got to put him through the full. So over the last few years, I tested him early on with the Chiefs, and then this past year with the Dolphins, really successful season where, he put out like a 98th percentile success rate versus zone coverage. And again, he's running a lot of short kind of gadgety routes, but I do think those in-breaking routes, the post, the dig, the curl, the slant, those are routes that he earns that separation on. And I think that's pretty similar to what Julian Edelman did with the Patriots. And now you have kind of a Patriots coaching staff coming down here to Miami. Actually, the Patriots former wide receiver coach, Chad O'Shea, is the offensive coordinator. So I think that's something to look out for there. I think that's a pretty similar situation. Then, yeah, when I'm thinking about other under the radar guys, I know we'll talk about one of my guys down there in Carolina who's been getting plenty of buzz later. But also I think it's worth, noting guys like several of the second-year receivers like Anthony Miller, Christian Kirk, as I mentioned, Dante Pettis. I don't know if these guys are under the radar, but they're all players that I actually really like a lot coming out of this 2018 rookie class.
Pettis is probably the most interesting one for me because I think he is I think he's a player that has gotten a good bit of buzz, but kind of hasn't taken that, that huge, big media leap yet, so to speak. How do you, again, kind of going off sheet a little bit, but how do you kind of foresee him, again, forcing the matter in San Francisco in what appears to be, again, we know the backfield's loaded. We know Jimmy G's just coming back. We know that there's, other options at the wide receiver position and early investment in this past draft as well. Do you think, Pettis kind of separates himself?
I do, and here's why. Pettis, what the 49ers front office and coaching staff have shown us is that they really value versatility in their wide receiver core. They specifically said, John Lynch was on NFL Network last year and specifically said that they liked Dante Pettis because he could play X, flanker, and slot. He could play all three receiver positions. This past year, they take a guy in Deebo Samuel, who I believe can play at least the flanker and slot position, and probably can chip in at X a little bit too, because I think he has pretty solid release moves off the line. Jalen Hurd, obviously versatile. So and of course the backfield too has layers of different options in terms of the player archetype. So they've shown us that they value player versatility, especially in the wide receiver core. However, with that being said, Dante Pettis last year went out and thrived as an X receiver. And I think that's what gives him a boost here among these top guys, is that I think he has the potential to be sort of a low-end number one receiver. He saw press coverage on 34% of the snaps that I sampled for him. That's up there in terms of the top, like some of the top X receivers in the league. A Marvin Jones type of X receiver, like not necessarily a number one guy like an AJ Green or DeAndre Hopkins, one of those type of players in terms of how much press they're seeing. But when you're lining up as that X receiver, that's about what you're going to see. And also, he performed very well. I think he has some Keenan Allen to his game in terms of how he separates as a route runner. So Pettis is the chip that I would place on in San Francisco.
Here's my thing, man, and I bring this up every time we talk about San Francisco. Are we sure that Jimmy Garoppolo is good? Is anybody actually sure about this? I mean, for real, he has less than a half a season's worth of pass attempts. I always bring this up because I'm so curious. I like Dante Pettis for a lot of the reasons that you noted. And I'm not fearful that Deebo Samuel is necessarily, a hedge against him at all. Pettis is great. But Jimmy Garoppolo, man, we're putting a lot of stock in San Francisco in the hopes that Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be some stud because he got paid like one. What's your take on Jimmy Garoppolo? I mean, are you buying into it?
Yeah, so, and just one more note on Pettis, like Deebo Samuel is that good short area receiver, after the catch type guy, earns quick separation. They still have Marquise Goodwin, who we shouldn't leave out of the conversation too as a vertical threat. I think Pettis, though, when we're talking about versatility, is the guy who combines all of those skill sets into one player. But you're right with Jimmy Garoppolo, I would answer the question, we're pretty sure he's good.
Right.
We're pretty sure, because that end of that 2017 season was truly dynamic. Think about who the 49ers were before he showed up. I mean, they were a complete vagabond team, and he not only elevated the offense and some of the players around him, he elevated really that entire team. And I think that's what you're looking for in terms of a quarterback that's worth it, that's worth that franchise type money. Now, it's a small sample. He is still a small sample size player, but I do tend to put more stock into it when I'm looking at that small sample. Right now, I'm willing to put more stock into the dynamic end of the 2017 season and put more stock into that than kind of the just okay-ish start that he had last year in about 2.5 games. But again, that all comes out to say that, I'm pretty sure he's good, but can't say with 100% certainty.
Look, you're Matt Harmon, man. This is your area of expertise. I am going to lean on your opinion here. And I'm going to need to lean on another opinion from you. I was recently attending a wedding, and I ran into a fashion problem. Clearly, the way you're dressed right now, better than me. I'm a t-shirt all day. You dress well on TV. You're big time in it. I went to the wedding. I wore a button-up shirt, no shirt underneath it. Wanted to let the chest breathe a little bit. Started to drop the buttons a little bit. Went 1, went 2. Looked at my wife. She wasn't paying attention. I went 3. She looked at me, kind of cross-eyed, like, what the hell are you doing? Went 4. She shook her head. I buttoned it all the way back up to 1. I don't know. What am I supposed to do? What's too many buttons?
At first, I was honest to God really nervous because I'm like, oh man, he's asking me a fashion
I had no
question.
idea where this was going to go either.
I wasn't like sure that I'd be qualified to answer this, but this actually, I am qualified to answer on because I've had a lot of discussions about this recently. So like the button I used to, especially at the NFL, I'd button up all the way to 1, right? Like, so it's just I've got just the 1 open up top, but lately I've been thinking like that's just way too formal, it's way too buttoned up. I look like a dweeb. I'm just not into it. So like I'm going into every event now 2 buttons down. So just to show like yeah, I'm mostly still a professional, but like I can be ready to party at any point.
Right.
Now, when you go 3 buttons down, that means like things are happening.
So wait a minute.
Something's
I'm pretty
happening.
concerned.
Something's
so
happening.
So when I went 4 buttons.
Oh, that means it's on. Like, you better be. Also, by the way, like you better be good and tanked at that point. I'm into this like kind of look right now where I've got the shirt, the button up, the short sleeve button up shirt unbuttoned, and then the like just a plain black shirt, like tucked in. Yeah. So like it's kind of a good medium look. You know, like I can be ready to party, but I also can be kind of looking a little professional. But the other weekend my girlfriend and I went to brunch, and I said, I looked at her, I said, babe, I'm gonna go 3 buttons down right away.
Sometimes you have to go 3 buttons. Sometimes you have to go 3 buttons.
But she goes, oh, that's a tone setter. I'm like, get damn right, it's a tone setter. So if you're
setting tones.
Normally, I mean, I gotta be a few drinks in to get to 3 buttons, but sometimes if you go 3 buttons right away, again, you're setting a tone for the night, if it's a wedding maybe, or the rest of the day if it's a brunch. And let's just say we eventually got down to 4 buttons
awesome.
at brunch that morning.
Yeah, man, I got to 4 buttons and I was like, do I go 5 and 6? I might as well take it off. I'm almost all the way there.
Then you're really making a statement.
Yeah, I was on the freeway doing about 60 by the time I got to 4 buttons, and then the wife was like, no way, button it up. So I concealed the chest. I don't have a bad chest. I'm going to be honest with you. A lot of my friends tell me I got a great chest. All right. We got to move on to another question here. Ryan, you wrote this question too, so I don't want to steal your thunder here.
Appreciate you lobbing off the backboard there for me, man. So we got we talked about some under the radar kind of guys. Matt kind of hinted at us maybe talking about some Carolina football. So before we get too far ahead, let's talk about the Green Bay offense. We know all about Davante Adams. I think he's poised to absolutely smash this year. The question in Green Bay, of course, the question that everyone's been asking themselves and trying to connect the dots is what do we do at the wide receiver 2 spot? Is it Geronimo Allison's year? Is it MVS? I think initially it was MVS, and then recently you've kind of heard, I think Adams himself might have came out and said, Allison's been kind of the guy to watch. And so, I mean, again, it's going to be interesting to kind of see how this shakes out. Do you have a strong pull towards either one?
I don't have a strong pull towards either one right now. I really want to see how the situation kind of plays out in camp, because you're right. It's been actually a little bit of a mixed message. At one point, Rodgers is talking up Geronimo Allison, then he's talking up MVS. Then at other points, like you said, Adams is coming out and praising Allison. And frankly, this has kind of been the situation in Green Bay for it feels like a few years now. We're always sort of debating who is kind of picking up the slack here. Now, this year, I feel like there's more slack to pick up than ever because we really only have Davante Adams as the established guy. But we're always kind of debating between the rest of the guys behind, the studs in Green Bay. And this year is no different. It feels like the leaks out of Green Bay are almost like political leaks where everybody's got an agenda to push. So I really want to follow this situation closely, but I haven't charted MVS in reception perception yet, and he's one that I want to get to before the summer ends and the season starts, because I liked what I saw out of him last year. I will note though that with Geronimo Allison, I did chart him for reception perception. He is in the ultimate draft kit with the fantasy footballers, and the results weren't great. He was not a great separator against man coverage, and I think the worst part, his success rate versus press coverage tested below the 5th percentile. So if you play some big slot receiver, perhaps that could offset some of these concerns in terms of separation, and that role is open in the offense. But right now, because I wasn't so impressed with what I saw out of him from a route running perspective, while he had some good production last year, I'm willing right now to put the chip on MVS, but not a strong pull at this point.
I got to be honest with you, Matt. I'm surprised. I took you for a Jake Kumaro guy. I'm surprised here.
Dude, my guy, let me tell you, there's too many receivers in the league for me to be out here charting Jake Kumaro.
Unbelievable. He's the new Jeff Janis, for God's sake.
So over at playerprofiler.com, MVS checking in at a 97th percentile speed score, 96th percentile, 4.37 40-yard dash, 71st percentile Spark X score. So overall, this is the athlete that I know for myself speaking, when I kind of have a two choices, I'm leaning towards the athlete. In Green Bay, it tends to be, Rodgers definitely kind of has his favorites, and if he's out here praising Allison, he's earned his trust, whatever the case may be. It's definitely going to be a storyline to follow because that wide receiver 2 spot in Green Bay, I think, for me personally, I think the Green Bay offense is poised to bounce back after those McCarthy years are kind of behind him now. A whole new outlook offensively. So I think that wide receiver 2 spot in Green Bay is going to be super, super valuable. It's just a question of who's going to kind of end up, when the music stops, who's going to be in that chair in the end. So.
All right, Ryan, I'm going to let you just do your questions, man. You do yours.
What else we got here?
We're talking about Carolina now.
This is it. So
Matt,
this is the moment. This is the moment. This is what I showed up for today.
This is why I put a wig on.
This is why you put a wig on. This is what I showed up for. So again, we talked about these contested wide receiver rooms. Another big headline is obviously DJ Moore second-year breakout. Is it going to happen, or is this going to be the Curtis Samuel show down in Carolina? I think you kind of lean away that you have a pretty strong opinion about it, Matt. So I'd love to get your takes on it, your insight.
Yeah, so actually, I really like both of these receivers. I think they're both poised to have good seasons. But let's start with DJ Moore. He's an important, when we talk about what I've learned with reception perception over the last 5 years, because I like to say that, if I was really trying to pursue an actual data-based study, from an academic perspective, I would have waited about 4 or 5 years to actually start publishing opinions based on this data. But of course, fellas, that doesn't work in sports media because the analysis, the people, the audience don't give a damn if there isn't a take with it. I couldn't be like,
we want the heat, bro, and we want it now.
Yeah, I couldn't be sitting here being like, hey, look, I got a cool series cooking up. Talk to you guys in 5 years. But please give me freelance writing jobs and eventually bring me to NFL Network and Yahoo Sports. Yeah, trust me on that one. No, that doesn't work. But so as a result, because I've been working with limited data, for years, I've had opinions based on reception perception data that I just absolutely would not have today. And one of those I think you could say is a guy like DJ Moore, who, I'm going to just be really honest, tests out very poorly as a route runner in reception perception against press and man coverage. He fell below the 10th percentile against man coverage. He fell below the 10th percentile against press coverage. A really, really poor 47% success rate versus press. And if you look at his route tree success rate chart, you're pretty much just looking at the flat, the slant, and the screen in terms of routes that he tests well on. But let's be clear, that doesn't mean he's going to be a bad player. I think that just helps us contextualize the role that he needs to be in. I mean, his perfect player comparison to me coming out of college and still today remains Golden Tate. I mean, I think he is a Golden Tate type player. Keep him in the slot. Let him work against zone coverage, which, by the way, he's very good at getting open against zone coverage. He's already one of the best after-catch receivers in the league, and he's pretty solid on 50-50 balls. So, yeah, DJ Moore right now, not a good route runner, but I think that you can still find a role for him and he can still be a very good player. But this brings us to Curtis Samuel, who I'm unreasonably sky high on.
Right.
So Curtis, it's possible to watch the 2018 Carolina Panthers and not come away with the take that, oh yeah, Samuel is just so far and away the better route runner, the better separator, the better outside wide receiver right now of these two players. Samuel tested with a 94th percentile success rate versus man coverage. He faced man coverage on over 68% of his charted routes because he was that outside flanker receiver. He did not fall below the NFL average in terms of success rate on any route on the route tree. So he's not just a burner. He's not just a short area receiver. He's a full field route runner. And also, he was great on contested catches too. Towards the end of the year, as Cam Newton's arm strength waned, he ends up getting thrown into a lot of contested situations, 35% of the targets that I sampled, and he comes out with a really strong conversion rate. So I actually do not think it is unreasonable to say that Curtis Samuel right now carries some similarities in terms of how he gets open, how he separates to early career Stefon Diggs. Now, is he going to take that next step that Diggs has taken to become one of the, in my opinion, 3 best route runners in the NFL and elite wide receiver? I don't know about that, but from an early career perspective, there are similar signs there. And overall, I mean, it's also just incredibly impressive what's become of Curtis Samuel, because he was that guy coming out of school that was a gadget player, and now he's this incredible route runner. So I think Carolina has 2 receivers better around Cam Newton than at any other point in his career, and I actually think they complement each other very well, because to go off that Stefon Diggs comparison, I would use Curtis Samuel in that way as the flanker receiver that defeats outside coverage, and then the way that the Vikings use Adam Thielen, I don't think that's a bad plan for DJ Moore, who is a special athlete and has legitimately, elite traits after the catch and at the catch point.
And I'm with you, man. I love Curtis Samuel, and it feels like he's on the cusp of a breakout by a lot of the metrics. When you lose Devin Funchess, so we open up about 80 targets, which should be a boon to DJ Moore, a boost to Curtis Samuel, and some senses. It kind of feels like if Carolina didn't have Christian McCaffrey, we would almost see a different Curtis Samuel too, because McCaffrey's dynamic ability out of the backfield as a runner, as a pass catcher, kind of removes some of the opportunity that I thought Curtis Samuel was going to see when he went to Carolina. I mean, if this is the blueprint going forward, I love him as a receiver, as a pure receiver. He only carried the ball 8 times last year, which is surprising for a guy who had well over 100 in his collegiate career. Mm-hmm. So it's just sort of a different dynamic situation having a running back like Christian McCaffrey. But I'm with you, man. It feels like wheels up on both guys, but you have got to love Curtis Samuel's future. I think at this point, plus with the cost, he's so much cheaper than DJ Moore.
So cheap, yeah.
Right?
Dude, I know. I just pulled up the latest ADPs here. DJ Moore's still going in that 5th round. Dude, Curtis Samuel's still hanging around in the 10th, man. Just the gap alone. I mean, it's almost a no-brainer.
And if you look at major publications that are putting out breakout player lists, or the best players at each position under 25 years old or something, DJ Moore will pop up there because he has those traits that people notice. People love after catch receivers because it's something that you see on Sunday. It's easy to spot. They make highlight reel plays, but people aren't talking about Curtis Samuel. In the fantasy world, yeah, people are hot on Samuel. There are a lot of other analysts that are in on him, from an opportunity perspective. I think what reception perception helps show the world over is that, yeah, it's not just that there's opportunity here. And it's not just that he's produced, he has legitimate superstar ability as a route runner. And if that comes together this year with a healthy Cam Newton, I mean, again, you will see people, believe me, in my mentions, there are people chirping nothing better than counting on Cam Newton to support 2 breakout receivers.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I would love. Give me a down. I'm sorry, I don't want to swear too much in your podcast.
You're good, trust me. Bro. This is wide open. We do much worse.
Wash it over us, bro.
But yeah, give me a fucking break.
Thank you.
Comparing Curtis Samuel and DJ Moore to Philly Brown and Jericho Cotchery. There's no utility in that whatsoever. So you can miss me with that completely.
Yeah, that's some of the worst analysis when they try and give you a throwback comparison. These guys, the 2 guys, I love what you said. DJ Moore and Curtis Samuel are far and away the 2 best receivers that he has had around him. And then, man, throw Christian McCaffrey into that mix. What a dynamic, athletic group of players that can all do different things.
And Ian Thomas, too, as a tight. I mean, Greg Olsen, we'll see what happens with him. I think if he can give him some games, that would be great. But Ian Thomas has breakout potential as a tight end. You mentioned Christian McCaffrey is such a unique, transformative presence in this Carolina. Like they've never had a receiver like DJ Moore. They've never had a receiver like Curtis Samuel. They've never had a running back like Christian McCaffrey. And like some of the jokers that they ran around behind Greg Olsen,
not great.
Ed Dixon, like what are we doing here with this? This is Ben Hartstock years ago. Like we have a legit playmaker here, and even some of these like backup receivers too. I think it's mostly going to flow through Samuel and Moore for sure. But Chris Hogan was a kind of a flop this past year in New England, but he could be their number 3 receiver. Torrey Smith, whatever. Like Aldrick Robinson out of the AAF, Aldrick Robinson. He's in there. Like there could be some intriguing depth on this team. And Jarius Wright, converted some third downs last year. Like it's interesting in Carolina for the first time in a long time. And let's just all keep our fingers crossed that Cam Newton's shoulder stays attached this season.
Let's do it. So we flew over the Carolina pass and the pass catchers there. Talked about Green Bay, hinted at Arizona a little bit. Dude, we're just bouncing all over here. Let's go to Los Angeles, the Chargers. The next question that I had that up here is this big Mike Williams year, man? We're talking about all these breakouts. We're talking about these guys taking steps forward. Can this be? Is this a season that you're high on for Big Mike?
Yeah, Mike Williams is another one kind of like with Calvin, really, that you have to ask yourself the question, like, yes, there is going to be regression. No debate there, in terms of the touchdown per targets number. That's not going to happen again this year. You have to ask a similar question, which is the volume boost going to come? I think and I come down kind of in the middle on this. Mike Williams did impress me in reception perception. No, he's not a good separator. Like, in terms of man and press coverage, he's not going to be one of the best route runners, not a great separator, but he impresses in the contested catch area. He saw a contested catch attempt on a third of his sampled targets, hauled in 84.6% of those. That's a top 10 score recorded all time. That's a legit trump card trait of his that carried over from the collegiate game. Yep. He's also a strong separator on the 9 route and the post route because he's just such a long strider that he can get open on those routes, even if he's not quick, even if he's not a detailed route runner. So I think he has big play potential. I think he obviously has red zone potential. The question just with me is, Hunter Henry coming back, could he be the more dynamic player? And, this is the beauty of best ball draft, guys, which by the way, has come to Yahoo Fantasy now. So
there we go. I love it, dude. This is how big time he is, bro. He's here plugging effortlessly, man.
Play best ball on Yahoo Fantasy because it rocks. I did my first draft, the test draft on the mobile app today. Badass. Loved it. Team was great too, but that's another discussion. Curtis Samuel, Dante Pettis, all these guys, they're on the team. Anyways, back to the point here, which is I think best ball really just you can talk theoretically about. Yeah, I like Mike Williams' potential in the Chargers offense. I like the way he can make big plays. I like the way he can be a touchdown scorer. But I've yet to click on Mike Williams in a best ball or a mock draft, and I've clicked on Hunter Henry plenty of times, and they kind of go around the same range. So what that says to me is, yes, from a theoretical perspective, I like the way that things set up for Mike Williams this year, but just not to the point that I'm willing to make that investment yet.
Let's just say hypothetically, we lose Tyrell Williams, of course, in this offense. That opens up some target opportunity. Let's say hypothetically Melvin Gordon sits out a majority of this year. What does that do to Mike Williams? Do you see that as a boost to him if we're looking at Justin Jackson and Austin Eckler in the backfield? I mean, because there's reality. What if Melvin Gordon gets traded? I know this is all hypothetical, but there is potential that something like that could happen.
Yeah, because that's what's interesting about this Chargers offense is that, I think people look at Tyrell Williams being gone and think, oh, that's more for Mike Williams, without accounting that Hunter Henry's back this year and he's a changing force. But the X factor in all of this is that the Chargers kind of want to be not one of the top 3 most they're not trying to be Seattle out here, but like they're a run. Sorry, Nate. They're a run-leaning team at least. They want to lean on a workhorse in Melvin Gordon. They have really the last couple of years. So if Melvin Gordon's gone, I think that could change things because also with Melvin Gordon and Austin Eckler back there, both those guys command passing game volume too. So I think the opportunity for Mike Williams gets a little overstated. Like I think he has 110, 120 target his range of outcomes. But maybe that does change if Melvin Gordon's gone, because then perhaps the offense would have to change.
Right. Hit it, Ryan. That's on you. I'm giving you all a
bro.
Yeah, man. This is you.
We're on autopilot here. So we got.
You're on autopilot.
I just got through my first tiers of the redraft rankings. So at wide receiver, I had Nuck at the top, followed by Adams. The third name, obviously for me, maybe it's obvious for other people too. I got Odell as that wide receiver 3. The question for you, and obviously Nate as well here, is there? I mean, there's a ton of hype around Cleveland. Obviously, we haven't even talked about Cleveland yet. A ton of hype, media, otherwise. Is there has to be a realistic case here where Odell Beckham is the overall wide receiver 1. Do you have a case that could be made for that? Are you a strong believer in that kind of scenario playing out?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, it is impossible, I think, to overstate the difference between going from Eli Manning to what we're going to have in Baker Mayfield with Odell Beckham. I mean, just before the trade went down, I said that I actually tweeted out that it would be a form of football injustice if we didn't get to see Odell Beckham's prime intersect with that of an ascending young quarterbacks, and then speak it and it becomes real, folks, because he gets traded to literally like a peak situation in Cleveland. So yeah, I think Adams is my wide receiver 1 heading into this year, but I think it's an interesting discussion to have between Beckham and DeAndre Hopkins, because let's just break down who Odell Beckham is, because I think sometimes the personality and all that can get lost in everything. This is an unbelievable rare player. I mean, any sort of, I think he's top 2 or top 3 in both yards and touchdowns per game since he entered the league. And then you look at him in reception perception. Until this past year, he owned the top success rate versus man coverage score. He also owns number 4 in that metric. I mean, he is always among the top 5 finishers in terms of success rate versus man coverage. He's an elite separator. This past year, every single round in the route tree, he has an above average score. And he's probably the best receiver off the line of scrimmage, getting off press in the NFL. He's never finished below the 98th percentile in terms of success rate versus press coverage. I mean, this is an elite player. We know what he can do at the catch point. We know what he can do after the catch. And now, again, he's going to intersect here with an accurate quarterback, someone who's not, literally an anchor for his team like Eli Manning is. I don't think the optimism should be tempered. I think we should all be sky high excited about Odell Beckham. And I think he is in the same tier with Hopkins and Adams. And I confidently look, like, if you're at the end of, I'm taking Odell Beckham at the end of the first round over Le'Veon Bell. I'm doing it over James Conner. I'm doing it over Joe Mixon. I'm not really thinking twice about it.
For sure.
I love Odell Beckham, man. And first off, I should shamelessly plug, Ryan, you're doing those rankings. Where are those rankings going to be available at?
We have a site. The site's coming. The site's coming. There is a site. There is a project, man. The Breakout Finder. BreakoutFinder.com, man. Quarterback, wide receiver, running back, tight end tiers coming to you soon with a boatload of other content that we've been plugging for the past 3, 4, 5 months, and here we are.
Yeah, Devy ranks, Dynasty ranks, all that. So a lot of good stuff. Ryan's been putting in a lot of time on that. Okay, let me jump back to this Odell Beckham thing. I'm with you, man. I think Matt laid it out perfectly. Him playing with Baker Mayfield is probably the best combination of things that could ever happen. And bear in mind, we're pairing back up 2 LSU teammates all these years later in Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham. So it's going to be great to see these 2 guys playing together, working in the same offense again. But yeah, amongst this group, Davante Adams, the target competition in Green Bay is nothing comparative to what Davante Adams' skill set is. MVS, Geronimo Allison, and Davante Adams, it's a clear, obvious winner there. And you look at DeAndre Hopkins, if we get a healthy Will Fuller, if Kiki Kuti comes back and he's somewhat healthy, there's some playmakers in that offense. Not that DeAndre's not going to get fed, but I still love Odell despite the fact that he's playing with Landry, because I think that Baker's going to lean on him as a go-to target, and this could be one of the biggest years that Odell Beckham has ever had. And I know that sounds crazy because Odell Beckham's one of the best receivers we've ever seen in the NFL to this point, especially in terms of fantasy. Okay, Matt. Now, it is widely understood that you are one of the top minds in the galaxy when it comes to wide receiver evaluation. So I have got a question for you that I need an answer to. Are you buying or selling 2019 Leonard Fournette?
Great, on topic.
So, bro, very serious podcast you're on right now.
Oh man, I think I'm selling because but I don't feel confident about that because again, he's another player that in terms of best ball drafts and early mocks, I haven't clicked on Leonard Fournette. I've not been taking him where he's been going. I've been more interested in players, like Devonta Freeman in that range. And I'm really actually interested in more of the wide receivers in that range because you can realistically, at the 2-3 turn, think about taking an AJ Green and pairing him with a Stephon Diggs or an Adam Thielen. And that is real tempting. But Fournette has bounce back potential only because there's not a lot of competition in that backfield. We know what Jacksonville wants to do as an offense. And I think the defense can be a little bit more improved. So I'm buying the theoretical bounce back, but not enough to the point that I'm willing to put a real chip on it.
Ryan, what do you got here?
Man, Fournette, I feel like we talked about Fournette maybe with JJ. I feel like he's another player that kind of comes up every other show. Man, it's tough for me too. Fournette, coming out of school, a ton of buzz, got Bo Jackson comparisons and any other kind of Hall of Famer type comparisons. I personally wasn't that high on him. The Jacksonville situation, I mean, we kind of know what that's going to be like offensively. Fournette, not necessarily a standout pass catcher, has an injury history, small or otherwise, might have some off-field stuff. I don't want to say off-field stuff. We've seen him kind of butt heads with the coaching staff, with the front office. So there's a couple things going on there that, outside of the field of play. So kind of coupled all those things together, I'm with Matt, a player that I see there in kind of in that third round range. I think there's a case for him for sure. He is going to be that bell cow back. The volume's going to be there. I get it. There's definitely a strong case for him there, but he's a player that I myself, find myself kind of scrolling past and going, someone like a AJ Green or something like that. So again, I understand the intrigue. I get people buying in, just a player that I find myself kind of staying away from.
I mean, but bear in mind, he hasn't had good quarterback play for a duration of his career, and maybe he showed up in the wrong era. But he has a quarterback now. I see Ryan already smiling. He's got big dick Nick Foles in front of him. So as long as we've got that, it could be. You don't have to be worried, Matt. We clearly go over the top here. Leonard Fournette, man, I'm with you. Just has never lived up to that hype. And he has been targeted in the past, but we've got an injury history here. They drafted Armstead behind him, who's kind of a cuff that a lot of people are looking at, sort of a sleeper name. I'm also selling Leonard Fournette at the price tag because I think he's still being treated as if he's this guy that's going to break out. And there just might be a chance that Leonard Fournette just never manifests. But if it's going to happen, you feel like it might be this year with a more competent quarterback, behind the line, him going into another season, hopefully healthy. But overall, I'm with you. I'm not buying Leonard Fournette. I'm wide receivers all day, especially in PPR. I mean, I load up on them, and that's just kind of always been my game plan. Okay, Matt. Do you watch NBA? I mean, I know you're very football centric, and I don't want to pigeonhole you because you've got hundreds of thousands of followers, if not millions. Are you at like 1.3 mil now?
I mean, definitely not.
No, you're not.
Definitely not even a little bit.
I don't know whose I looked at. It was somebody's profile. So, but
it wasn't mine.
Do you watch NBA? Are you an NBA fan?
Oh, I watch a little bit here and there, and especially working here now, not at the NFL Network when it's NFL all the time,
right.
I've gotten a little bit more exposed to it, and especially like the online culture is so fun. So yeah, it's hard not to get in. At least the memes are good,
This question was way better before Kawhi Leonard signed with the Clippers because the original question was going to be if he had signed with the Lakers. You're in LA, is that correct?
Sir.
Okay. If he had signed with the Lakers, I was going to ask, is NBA basketball even worth watching? Because I'm just assuming the Lakers are going to dominate. But after seeing all this shift, my question is, are the Portland Trailblazers going to be any good? Do you have any take on this whatsoever? You can hard pass if you don't want to put your reputation on the line and those 1.1 million followers.
Well, as a lifelong Clippers fan.
Here we go. Here we go.
I don't know that I'm objective. I can't be really objective here because as of 2 weeks ago, I'm a lifelong Clippers fan. So I don't know that I'm an objective answer.
Half the Golden State fans are too. Okay, so you're clearly fading the Blazers. You heard it here first. You know who else is getting faded? You mentioned his name earlier, AJ Green. We've seen a wide receiver who was prolific early in his career. I mean, 1,000 yards every year except the year where he came up just shy because of an injury. We've seen Tyler Boyd start to ascend in this offense a bit, which I think is also playing a factor. Some people aren't a big fan of Andy Dalton. But AJ Green is going off around the, third, fourth round, depending on where you're looking. I've seen him at wide receiver 19 in some drafts. Has the AJ Green fade gone too far in dynasty, redraft, whatever take you want here?
Yeah, I mean, talk about a guy who is the inverse of some of the other players like Mike Williams and Leonard Fournette that we've talked about. Like, I can't stop clicking on AJ Green's name, in best ball drafts, especially look, man, if you can get one of those top 4 picks, lock in a McCaffrey, a Zeke, a Barkley, a Kamara. By the way, I think Alvin Kamara might be my favorite of those 4 this year, but that's a whole nother discussion. And then you come back on that 2-3 round turn, like I mentioned earlier, and grab AJ Green, who has a top 5 wide receiver ceiling if he stays healthy. I don't think that should be debated. And then pair him with Stephon Diggs or an Adam Thielen there. That's a really nice way to start your teams this year. So I cannot stop picking AJ Green in the second round, especially the late second round range. And man, look, like AJ Green too, he's a guy who I think is underrated really in his career in terms of what a route runner he is. We talk about, I think the top 3 route runners in the NFL right now are Stephon Diggs, Antonio Brown, and Odell Beckham. But those are like the smaller guys. Then you start to look at like the bigger wide receivers. Michael Thomas is up there. But over the last 5 years, AJ Green has been up in that stratosphere as well. And this past year, we still saw him post a really nice success rate versus man coverage score and reception perception, 72.7% success rate. That's at the 85th percentile. So he's still a very, very good separator. I still think he's a peak player. And if he's healthy this year, I think he's worth taking a risk on as a guy who has a top 5 ceiling late in the second round.
So I got 2 questions for you. First off, I couldn't help but hear it. You said top 5 potential. I mean, when you look at the receivers in this class, so you're high on AJ Green to say that, because we know that Julio's still breathing air. You got DeAndre, Michael Thomas, Juju's going to see 200 targets this year in that offense. He's going to get a big boost here. So if you're high on AJ Green like that, I have a question for you, and it's a dynasty question here.
All right.
A lot of times the concern with purchasing a player like AJ Green is that we don't know how long they're going to play for. When you look at his style and you look at the way he wins, do you see AJ Green playing a little bit longer in his career than, say, a Julio Jones or say a player that's a little more explosive and winning more off athleticism than nuance?
Yeah, I think that's the tough part too, and that's why I'm really saying like top 5 for this season. I think he has that potential because of the target volume that he should see and still having what I think is a really strong skill set. I'm getting a little more worried about the Cincinnati offense because they can't, if you think you guys have had a bad month or any of your listeners have had a bad month, you have not had a worse month than the Cincinnati Bengals offensive line.
That offensive line is not good. Not good right now.
And it's getting worse by the minute. I mean, somebody else might have retired while we started recording. So, that's yeah. Well, I don't know. I don't know if you fit the mold. You might have a nice chest, but I don't know if you're out there blocking it.
Thank you.
So confirmed. I think that that is a little bit more worrisome. But one thing that I think is interesting with the wide receiver position in general, when you're looking at, and I really should maybe write something up about this, but I got a lot to do, guys. Some of these bigger wide receivers, I think they have a tougher time transitioning into the age range unless they make that shift into the big slot receiver role. Like we've seen Larry Fitzgerald extend his career doing that. We saw Reggie Wayne extend his career doing that. But
Vincent Jackson
a little bit. Look, what we haven't seen though is a player like Des Bryant comes to mind, that when the physical gifts faded, he was done. He couldn't get open versus anybody his last year in Dallas, and nobody wanted him in 2018, despite all the media hype out there, because he couldn't really make that role change. So that's the thing with a player like AJ Green. Can he make that role change? Because eventually the physical gifts are going to go. And I mean, there's no comparing, like from a nuance perspective, AJ Green is a more technical player than a Des Bryant. But that's something that I think you have to look at with these wide receivers, because some of the smaller guys too, like Antonio Brown, when he eventually starts to decline as an outside X receiver, you can throw AB in the slot because of the nuance and the size build perspective. Same thing with some of these other players out there too. So I think that's something to pay attention to with aging receivers.
Like it. Yeah. So before we've almost at the end of the line here. It flew by. Ton of content, dude. Matt is the man. Before we kind of get this last question off here, and we let Matt, plug whatever he's got to plug, man. He kind of plugged mid show, but we're gonna let him have at it before we sign off. Matt, you kind of hinted at it before, talking these last 10 minutes or so, and I saw you put up a tweet too about how might have been rounds 5 through 8 about this running back conundrum that you have. You don't feel good about any of these backs. Again, and you spoke about it, briefly before about how it's probably this modified 0 RB approach where if you are in that, those draft slots 1 through 5, you get one of the top 5 backs, and then you're just going wide receiver until maybe the 9th round, 8th round, 9th round, 10th round. So yeah. there is that wasteland in the middle. Is that how your teams are kind of coming together? Do you find yourself more wide receiver heavy? Again, this is the conversation we have every single year. There's no right way to build a team, but kind of how is the board falling for you? What teams do you find yourself liking the most? Are you wide receiver heavy early on and often, or?
I mean, that's the tough part, man. It's like I said earlier, I love some of the wide receiver values in rounds 2 and 3. But God, man, then you get on the board. And again, this is why best ball drafts are so great, because it's fun to sit here and talk about theoretical player value. But like when it comes to building a team, what teams do you really like? And I think it almost starts in the 4th round where you're looking at like David Montgomery and Sony Michel. But I can at least tell myself a story with those guys where those picks are going to work out. But God, man, you get in the 5th to 8th round range.
It's gross.
It's gross. Like you're looking at Darius Geis, that's a pass. Lamar Miller, like I don't need to take the 2 condom pick again, man. Like I just don't need that. Like Rashad Penny and Darrell Henderson, there's potential there, but there could also be legitimately like 0 usability with those.
Yikes, Nate.
Come on, bro.
Oh, I'm high on Chris Carson. Like, so I like him as a pick.
It's always Chris Carson.
Sorry, man, that's your leading rusher.
That's all we got.
You're looking at Tariq Cohen, Latavius Murray, Jordan Howard, Miles Sanders, Royce Freeman. Like, I like some of those picks, but I'm really not trying to have those guys be my RB2. I would like for them to be a potential bench option, a stash. But if I'm talking like I need that guy to play, I need that guy to put up usable weeks, especially from a season-long perspective. I can get down with Latavius Murray in a best ball. I can get down with even Rashad Penny or Darrell Henderson, because I think those guys are going to have weeks. I'm not down with Darius Geis in almost any reason. Tevin Coleman's one pick in this area that I've kind of liked, because I don't know that you can confidently say that we know how the 49ers backfield is going to go, but I think right now Tevin Coleman's my favorite bet of this group. If everything works out the way I think it will, which it never does. Yeah, it's a rough range of players, man.
Absolutely.
It's difficult, and for that reason, it's like, God, I really want to have like 2 top-end workhorses before I get out of there, because I'm just really not convinced of the stock of any of those players there.
Right,
dude. Matt Harmon, as the overlay says, drops fantasy gold, makes it rain fantasy gold.
There he is, man. There he is.
And you'll see what my green screen background is. Obviously, these guys don't know. They just see me in a wig and glasses looking like an idiot, and I got this green screen behind me. But just wait, it's pretty impressive. Matt, dude, thank you for coming on. Matt Harmon _BYB. Plug what you want, my man.
Yeah, guys, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It's fun. Like, the wave is really about to hit us, like training camp is going to come. The tidal wave takes us. We pop our head back up in January, and we're like, where the hell did the last 5 months go? So it's good to take that kind of like one last spin around before we start to get, start drinking from the fire hose. All the information comes out. So thank you guys so much for having me. And, people can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at MattHarmon _BYB, hashtag reception perception for where you can find all that information. And looking forward to a really good year with Yahoo this season.
Awesome, man.
Matt Harmon, man.
Go check out breakoutfinder.com right now at the landing page. You can sign up for the future updates. We launch Sunday morning, tons of content, ranks, steamy picture of me with 5 buttons undone. You can have it all over there. I'll sign it and I'll send it to you. I'll scan it. Postage is way too expensive. All right, Matt.
Get that chest out there.
Yeah, that's right, man. You told me I had a good chest. All right, Matt, thank you for coming on, man. You're a blast. You're one of the best in the industry, and I hope you hit 2 million followers this year.